What happens when the thing we trust most betrays us? When the paper in our wallets becomes worthless? When the numbers on screens dissolve into nothing? This is not a question of if, it is a question of when. And more importantly, what remains standing when everything else crumbles? Picture a morning like any other. The sun rises, markets open, coffee is brewed. People go about their routines with the quiet confidence that the money they earned yesterday will still have value today. But somewhere in the hidden machinery of the financial system, something has already begun to unravel. A crack in the foundation, a tremor that will become an earthquake. The first signs are subtle. Prices begin to shift. Not gradually, as they always do, but erratically. Bread that cost 1 unit yesterday costs 3 today. By tomorrow, it will cost 10. People notice, but they tell themselves it's temporary, a disruption, a correction. They have faith in the system because they have no choice but to have faith. Their entire lives are denominated in this currency, their labor, their savings, their future. But faith, when placed in paper, is a fragile thing. The government makes an announcement, calm and measured, as governments always are when panic is imminent. They speak of confidence, of stability, of measures being taken. But the words ring hollow because the truth is already visible in the streets. Long lines form outside banks. Not the orderly queues of normal business, but desperate crowds, pressing against glass doors, demanding their money. Their life's work reduced to digits in a system that is now failing them. The banks close early that day. They call it a temporary measure. They never reopen. What follows is a kind of collective awakening, painful and disorienting. The realization that money, this thing they traded hours of their lives for, was never really theirs. It was always a promise, a social contract. And contracts can be broken. In the chaos, you see humanity at its most raw. Some hoard whatever they can, filling rooms with goods they may never use, driven by the primal fear of scarcity. Others turn to anger, lashing out at institutions, at neighbors, at anyone who seems to have more. The social fabric, held together by the invisible thread of economic trust, begins to fray. But then, something unexpected emerges. In the spaces between the panic and the desperation, people begin to remember older truths. Truths that existed long before central banks and stock exchanges. Truths that will exist long after. A farmer who weeks ago was struggling to pay his debts now finds himself wealthy in a new way. Not in currency, but in capacity. He has land. He has seeds, he has knowledge, and suddenly these things are worth more than any number printed on paper ever was. People come to him not with money but with offers, skills exchanged for food, labor for sustenance. The ancient language of barter, dormant for generations, awakens. A craftsman whose furniture sat unsold in a market that demanded cheap, mass-produced goods discovers that his skills are now invaluable. People need things that last, things made with care, things that hold value, not because a market says so, but because they are genuinely useful. He trades a chair for medicine, a table for tools. Each piece he creates is an act of survival and an expression of human ingenuity. Communities that had become fragmented, neighbors who barely knew each other's names, begin to coalesce. They have to. Survival demands cooperation. They form networks of mutual aid. One person has medical knowledge. Another can fix machines. Someone else can teach. They create their own economy, one based not on abstract value, but on real human needs and real human abilities. This is not romantic. It is hard, brutally hard. There are losses.
Some who depended entirely on the old system, who never learned skills beyond navigating spreadsheets and conference calls, find themselves adrift. The transition is cruel to those who cannot adapt. But humans, for all their flaws, are adaptable creatures. They learn, they evolve, they find ways forward.
Months pass, maybe years. The timeline blurs because time itself is measured differently now. Not in quarterly earnings or fiscal years, but in seasons, in harvests, in the rhythm of actual tangible life. The old currency is still around physically. People find stacks of it in abandoned buildings, use it to start fires, paper walls against the cold. Children play with it, creating elaborate games with colorful rectangles that their parents once killed themselves working for. It's almost funny, in a tragic way, how quickly it became meaningless. But other forms of value persist and strengthen. Trust becomes the new currency, but it's earned differently. You trust someone because they've proven themselves reliable, because they kept their word, because when you needed help, they were there. This trust cannot be printed, cannot be inflated, cannot be manipulated by distant institutions. Knowledge emerges as wealth. The person who knows which plants heal, which water is safe, how to preserve food, how to build shelter that withstands storms. These people are the new wealthy. Their riches cannot be confiscated or devalued. They carry their wealth inside themselves. Community bonds become more valuable than any stock portfolio. The network of relationships, of reciprocal obligations, of shared purpose. These invisible threads, stronger than any contract, create a safety net that no insurance policy could match. Physical goods with real utility hold worth. Tools that help create or repair, seeds that can grow into food, books that contain wisdom, materials that serve genuine purposes, not luxury brands or status symbols, but things that help people survive and thrive. And something else survives. Something harder to quantify but impossible to ignore. Art, music, story. Even in the darkest times, perhaps especially in the darkest times, humans create. They sing songs around fires. They paint on walls. They tell stories to their children about how things were, how things changed, what they learned. Because humans don't just need food and shelter. They need meaning. They need beauty. They need connection to something larger than mere survival. The initial question, what survives when money fails, begins to answer itself not through theory but through lived experience. Money was always just a tool, a medium of exchange. Useful, yes. Convenient, certainly. But never the thing itself. Never the actual value. Just a representation of value. And when the representation fails, the real things remain. Land remains. You cannot print more earth. You cannot inflate the soil. It exists solid and patient, ready to produce for those who know how to work with it. Skills remain. The knowledge of how to make, how to fix, how to heal, how to teach. These things live in human minds and hands, passed from person to person, generation to generation. Relationships remain. The bonds forged through shared struggle, through mutual support, through the simple act of showing up for each other. These connections form the true wealth of any society. Resilience remains. The human capacity to adapt, to innovate, to find solutions where none seem to exist. The stubborn refusal to give up, to surrender to despair, to stop building toward a better tomorrow. Time passes and new systems emerge. Not immediately, not perfectly, but humans are system builders. They cannot help but create order from chaos. This time, though, the systems are different.
They're built on harder lessons, on the understanding that value must be rooted in something real, that trust must be earned, that no institution is too big to fail, and no currency is too established to collapse. Some argue for a return to old ways. Metals, tangible and scarce, become the basis for new exchanges. Others embrace new technologies, seeking systems that cannot be controlled by any single authority. Still others maintain that the best economy is the simplest one, face-to-face, person-to-person, need met with capability. What matters is not which system wins, but what has been learned. That wealth is not what you have in a bank. Wealth is what you can do, who you know, what you can create, and how you treat others. That money is useful when it works, but it is not life itself. That the most important investments are not financial, but human, in skills, in relationships, in character, in community.
The story of what survives when money fails is ultimately the story of what always mattered. We just forgot. Seduced by the convenience of abstraction, by the comfort of numbers on screens, by the illusion that wealth could be separated from worth. Years later, there are children who never knew the old world. They hear stories about it and find it strange, a time when people would spend most of their waking hours doing things they didn't care about, to earn abstract numbers that could be exchanged for goods and services. It sounds to them unnecessarily complicated. They live in a world where value is more direct, more honest, harder in some ways, but clearer. And perhaps that's the final lesson, that crisis, for all its pain, is also clarification. It strips away what is artificial and reveals what is essential. When money fails, what survives is what was always real. The land beneath our feet, the skills in our hands, the knowledge in our minds, the bonds between us, the capacity to create, to adapt, to endure. These things cannot be printed by governments, cannot be manipulated by markets, cannot be stolen by hackers or devalued by policy. They are the bedrock of human civilization, present at our beginning, necessary for our continuation. So when the next great financial system rises, as one inevitably will, we must remember this truth. Money is a tool, not a master. Useful when it works, but never more important than the real wealth it was meant to represent. The wealth of human capability, the wealth of human connection, the wealth of the earth itself. Because in the end, when everything else is stripped away, what survives is not what we own. It's who we are, what we can do, and how we treat each other. That is the wealth that cannot fail. That is what endures. The screen fades to black. In the silence, you hear it again. Wind. But this time, not rustling currency, just wind. Moving through fields, through trees, through the world that was here before money and will be here long after, reminding us that we are part of something much older, much larger, and much more durable than any economy we might build. That is what survives when money fails. Everything that truly mattered all along.